Performance culture, or a culture of excellence. You probably heard these words most likely from leaders in your organization or your company. And the question is, how do we lead this discussion without getting into ideologies? Very quickly, you often will hear, well, we have so many people who want to work less, but we need to be more productive. We need to get work done. And also everything we have, the wealth we have, needs to be maintained by work. Very quickly, the discussion goes down to topics such as how many vacations or paid vacations should you have, how many days off should you have, how many days off do you usually take, and usually quite quickly it ends up with, okay, what is a sick day? When do you take a sick day? Is there a difference between different generations of taking sick days, and when do they do that? Under which circumstances? We need to look at the facts. That is the point here. We need to look at the facts. Often we have people who lead this discussion or try to lead the discussion by ideology. That is not helpful. If we do not look at the facts, we will be unable to make anything better. Let's look into vacation or paid vacation first. Of course, you can think that when we have less paid vacation, so let's say you just subtract, you take away 5 days away of paid leave, paid vacation, and then people will be more productive and we will have a more successful economy, a stronger economy. And often people refer to the United States of America. They say in the United States of America, there's a very low amount of paid vacation and paid leave. And that's true. Usually employers offer roughly 10 days per year. Often there are different situations, different systems in different states, but also usually you have more days off the older you are. So there is some sort of system in place which somehow works, but it's still based on, when you look into laws, 0 days right, a right for 0 days of paid vacation. And of course you could now say, hey, when we just say there is no right to paid leave, people will be more productive, they probably work harder to get the right, and maybe they work their days off to get some days paid to be somewhere else than in the company. And when we look at the facts, you probably expect there will be many countries that have 0 days of paid leave. And I looked them all up, and of course we can now say, are they more successful from an economic point of view? So the United States of America have 0 days of paid leave. Other countries with 0 days of paid leave are, for example, Malawi, Palau, Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, Micronesia, or Nauru. Let's just say they're not particularly economic superpowers. Even within their context of, yes, they're smaller, less people live there, even within that context, they are not too economically successful. Wealth isn't spread across the country. Usually the life expectancy is lower. It's not going too well on these islands in general. Of course, some people will now say, hey, you just missed out on St. Kitts and Nevis. No, that's not correct. They had a change of law there. They had 0 days in the first year when you work somewhere. That's still the case. But after 1 year of employment somewhere, you have a right of a minimum of 14 days paid leave, paid vacation. Most countries, by the way, hover around the mark of 20, 22 days. That seems to be the general agreement somewhere there. Some people go up and they say, well, 20 is what you have on paper, but in reality you offer more. That's the case in many countries. And then, of course, you see a different amount of, let's say, paid leave by public holidays. When there is the Independence Day in the US, no one's working, of course, or hardly anyone is working. Even there, some people, for example, in the events industry are working. Very quickly, some people derive a fact that they think is correct. And the fact is that they say when you have less paid leave, you will be economically more successful. Well, then we can look into statistics and into the data we have. And in conclusion, the country with the most amount of paid leave days will then be economically not very successful, and probably wealth is not spread across the country. And what is the country with most days of paid leave? It's Luxembourg. 32 days of paid vacation, paid leave when you have a public position, 26 days in private positions, but that is added with, of course, public holidays, public vacations, and of course, it depends where you work. There are companies, when they are in competition with others, that simply offer more. When you look into the overall data we have about Luxembourg, this goes up to 47 days per year. And by the way, when you say, well, Luxembourg is a bit bigger, it's the center of Europe. Is there anything smaller? Yes. Andorra with 31, also very wealthy with a lot of paid leave. And when you say, well, other countries work their way up, let's look at countries where they really work from nothing is there to being now very economically relevant. For example, the United Arab Emirates, UAE, 30 days of paid leave. So let's just get one argument off the table. When you simply say less days of paid leave lead to more productivity, to more income, to more profit, that is plain wrong. There is not a single angle where you can justify that point of view. And if you still put that point of view out there, it simply means that you lead a discussion based on ideology, not based on facts. Okay, of course, now you can say, well, maybe it's about the amount of working hours per year. When you work more hours per year, because you can work different amounts of hours, of course, during the day. And when we work more hours, then most likely you will see that you are more economically successful. Well, let's look into the list there, because we have that data. The country with most working hours that we have per year is Cambodia, with 2,455.55 working hours. Let's say Cambodia is not the place where you say the economic superpower is at home. Here, by the way, followed by Myanmar, Mexico, Malaysia. Singapore is the first country where you would say there is a certain level of wealth across the country, which is, let's say, sort of spread across the country in all areas, which is not completely true. Also, the perception and the fact that Singapore is not a democracy as we see it as one, there are elected members of a representation, but there are lots of other factors around that where you say that's not what many people expect. By the way, when you now say China, they will be on top of the list. No, they're not. They are ranked 11 with 2,174. And when we go down that list, at the very bottom of the list, and of course we do not have that data of all countries because not every single country has an office for statistics or they record the amount of work hours. We only can stick to the countries we have that are, by the way, 66. So a good share that we can say this is a representative statistics. And Germany is last on the list, 1,353 hours per year. And of course, you could now say, well, can't we take a look at the bottom of the list? And then maybe we can derive that when you work less, you will get to the result that you're not doing too well. Yeah, let's take a look at the list at the very bottom. It's Germany at the very bottom. And when I now go from the bottom up, it's Germany, Denmark, Norway, Netherlands, Iceland, France, Luxembourg, and Belgium. Let's just say these are countries that are not doing too bad. Uruguay, you have as one of the probably outliers you did not expect, followed immediately by Switzerland, Sweden, Australia, countries where you have wealth spread across the country. You have democracies in the vast majority of these countries. So once more, you see that just working more, sitting there for longer hours is obviously not the key. And I can tell you, if this is surprising to you, just be open to admit that, because I'm a self-employed entrepreneur. I was on the same bandwagon of saying we have to work more to keep our wealth and to keep everything we have in the place it is. It is not the amount of hours. It is as crystal clear as it is. Of course, there might be a certain minimum level we have to maintain, but as long as we do not have any kind of, let's say, significant scientific data to support that point of view, we cannot lead the discussion about culture of excellence or culture of performance when we do not stick to the facts. And of course, you could now say, well, maybe we shouldn't look at the amount of hours worked, but let's look at sick days. Yes, and there are statistics. When you look at the Statista Consumer Insight, what is the percentage of people that haven't taken a single sick leave day during the last 12 months? So 0 sick days during the last 12 months. In Korea, 51%. In Japan, 45%. So you could now say, well, I think that is a striking evidence that you can be more productive. Looking on the other side at, for example, psychological illnesses or the suicide rate, be careful with your assumption. When you go down the list, Spain, 39%, France, 34% haven't taken a single sick day. 20% in Germany. It's, by the way, 27% in Great Britain, 23% in the US. So that means when you go down the list to, for example, Australia, last on the list, by the way, 14% have not taken a single sick leave day. That means 7 out of 8 people in the room have taken a sick leave day. So first, going to work when you're sick doesn't make any sense because there is a massive risk of cross-contamination. When you have anything which is contagious, you will probably bring it forward to others who then become sick. When you say I go to work sick, you might have one day more where you're present, but then you fall sick significantly and you miss a lot longer compared to when you just had gone to bed and recovered and simply got back to work when you are healthy again. So again, the discussion of just skip sick days and show up at work when you are not doing well, that is not what leads to a company, an organization, or a sustainable society. The question now is, what are the circumstances we have to deliver? And there are aspects we have to talk about. So number one is, what are the benefits you offer? What actually motivates people to work for you? And by the way, I mean real benefits. No benefits such as, oh, you can wear jeans on Friday. We have casual Friday here. Or we have a basket with fruit in there. The fruit basket is something which people simply either expect, but if it misses, people will say, well, just pay me well and I can buy my fruit by myself. When you have water or coffee for free, that is not the hot take you think it is. And that's just the start of that. What are the real benefits you offer? And please look into your organization. What do you offer? And by the way, when you now say, oh, our business model is very challenging, we have lots of competitors, we can't do that, we can't afford that, doesn't matter. People will not show up for work, or in the future, they will work less for you, or simply do quiet quitting, silent quitting, do just the very basic amount of work that they agreed to do for you. Next step, what is the flexibility you offer? So first, from a location, can you only work from your office, or can you work from home, or can you work from anywhere? The more attractive, the more relaxed people will be, and the more productive they will be for you. What about time? Can people work any time of the day, or do you have a certain point in time where you say, well, this amount of time needs to be covered? Is there any kind of personal flexibility when people say, hey, I have personal circumstances in my life which need to be integrated into work? Do you say, yes, we have different options to satisfy that, or to help you with that? Or would you simply say, no, look, this is the offer, and anything in your private life is private, don't bother us with that? Productivity is massively influenced by the variables around people working. And of course, next step, what do you offer when people want to develop themselves? Do you actually say, we have a development program, we have seminars, coachings, workshops, professionally led, not the online cheap course or the PowerPoint slide read out by some internal person with no qualification, being a trainer, a coach, or anything of the jobs I mentioned before? What do you offer when people want to develop? And of course, do you really offer that? Or do you say, well, we could offer you some seminars, but then you have to sign this piece of paper and you have to stay within this organization for the next 2 years. And you can't ask for more money or less time. Everything stays unchanged for the next 2 years. So basically, you give them a bit of education, and in return, you immediately cash in on them, not only communicating mistrust towards them, but also using a practice which is either ethically or morally questionable, or, as in many countries, illegal. Can't be sustained. It isn't worth the paper it's printed on. The main question here is, why should someone perform a culture of excellence or culture of performance with you? And I know that some people say, and I include myself in that, they say it's an inner drive I have. And not everyone has that drive. Some people say, I can spend my life very happily without work, or doing something else than work, or doing voluntary work, or whatever else. Some people say, no, I'd like to contribute to something bigger. And of course you can do that. However, when you now say there is no return for the investment, you shouldn't be surprised that people do not perform a culture of excellence or a culture of performance in your organization. When I say, why does anything I do here, or when I do more, why does this pay off? And I can tell you from my experience. The first company I worked for was a pharmaceutical company. Second one was a large IT company. When I worked more, it immediately paid off financially. And there was no limit to that. You can work longer, you can do more, cash, money. If you now say, money isn't my motivator, bit challenging. What can you offer? Maybe days off, or when people work more hours and you say, hey, when you work 10 more hours, probably on a Friday, we would add 12 hours to your account, so you can take 12 hours off instead of 20% bonus. Is there anything you offer except saying thank you, or putting some mysterious, oh, you're part of something bigger, you're a pillar of this organization, blah, blah, blah. A thank you never paid the rent. When you expect more, but you do not give back more, you shouldn't be surprised that people are neither thankful nor performing for you. And it's not the people's fault in this case. And by the way, other aspects which are not relevant is, back in the days, these kind of talks, just stop it. Back in the days I know, back in the days it was more challenging. That is not relevant for today's society. Hats off to you for doing that. I started my work when there's 10% unemployment on the market. Very hard, very tough. We work long hours, including rules such as you travel for 18 hours for your company, but you only get 10 hours booked on your account. To be fair, I do not want these days back. Everything you work, you should get paid for. And when you say back in the days, or you simply just generalize, all young people do not want to work, blah, 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 yada, 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 that simply means you mass generalize and you disqualify yourself as a leader. Looking into scientific evidence, when we all want to sum this up now, Professor Dr. Volker Nürnberg in Germany, one of the leading scientists on the matter of productivity, sick days, and what's happening in organization, he says every organization has the amount of sick people they deserve. And how he found out was he followed certain people through their career. So, for example, with one car manufacturer in Germany, there was one leader, and in his department, a lot of people were sick, basically constantly. And then this leader changed the employer, went to a different car manufacturer, and the same thing happened there. So you see, it was not the job, it was not the kind of work they did, it was the leader who failed to serve the people. And by the way, when you ask me about that, and I do science and scientific research on the matter, every company has the productivity they deserve. We always have one aspect which every single company, no matter if you work in science or in production, if you work in tech or if you work in the social service, there is always one thing that every person does, and is the edge of bad decision. You know the edge of the bad when you get up in the morning. The edge of bad decision is when people wake up in the morning and they say, look, haven't slept too well, neck aches a bit. Then they look out of the window and they say, it's raining. Not great, is it? And then they have to make a decision. And when you have great leadership with very well qualified leaders who learned leadership, and I mean professionally learned leadership, when you have great teams, great organizations, culture of performance and excellence pays off, and you serve the people who work for you, then people will say, come on, let's do this, I'm not going to stay in bed. However, when you just offer the bare minimum and you come up with the excuses of, oh no, all the people are lazy, and you basically offer the bare minimum, people will say, look, it's Wednesday now, and for me, it's an early weekend. I have to put a notice, and a doctor's notice, a proof of being sick in after being sick for 3 days. It's Wednesday, so Thursday, Friday is just 2. It's an early weekend for me. I'm back for work on Monday. I now have 4 days off, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And unfortunately, and I almost can't believe that I say that, it's not the people's fault. It's the employer's fault. I am an employer. I'm a self-employed person. For a way too long time, we were leading this discussion based on ideology. I was as surprised about these numbers as you were. When we want people to do more for us, we have to see that in a market which is tight, where talent is the shortage and it's not looking anywhere near getting better. And by the way, when you are in a country which is anti-immigration, you will face even worse situations. Just an information to maybe update your mindset on the matter and bring a bit of factual evidence into the discussions we have right now around the planet. When you have a talent shortage and you say, I feel entitled to other people's work, then you do what we always criticize with others, entitlement thinking. And that is not acceptable. What you now have to look at is, what are the benefits? What is the flexibility? What is the development you can offer? And number one reason why people leave or stay in an organization, leadership behavior. Train your leaders professionally, get the best organization out of your organization that you have right now. If you bring all of that together, you will have amazing people who love to work for you. And I wish you all the best implementing that. And of course, some people might now say, well, that's a hard pill to swallow. And yes, it is. When you like to talk about that, have questions, want to have a chat with me, just drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com. You find the email address also in the show notes of this podcast. When you, by the way, I always put my LinkedIn there as well. Feel free to connect with me. We can chat there. Thank you very much, by the way, for the great discussions we had during the last weeks. Always happy to have future discussions as well. You find everything you need in the show notes of this podcast. podcast. Another aspect is we have live sessions and more, of course, have a lot of things published on the matter. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, put your email address in there, you only receive one email every Wednesday morning. It's 100% content, ad-free guarantee. The only way to access everything that is in there, which means all the podcasts, all the articles to share, everything I publish, scientific evidence, all the sources, and also access to all the live sessions that we do, usually on a monthly basis, including the dates when they happen, all of that only is accessible via the so-called expert letter. So when you go to expert.nb-networks.com and just take it from there, and you will stay up to date. By the way, I put the expert letter into the show notes of this podcast as well, so feel free to register there. However, the most important thing is the third one. Apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive change that you obviously want to see in your organization. I wish you all the best doing so. I'm available for help 24/7, so feel free to contact me anytime. And at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.